Every CISO knows they need a zero trust strategy. But the path from theory to reality is often a minefield of complexity and disruption. Today, we're going to burn that old map. We're going to tackle the single biggest question leaders have. How do you make zero trust a reality? Welcome back to the Enterprise Tech Playbook. We're on a mission to empower every IT professional with actionable wisdom and a collaborative community making their next stride in enterprise tech, one that truly leads with impact. Today, we have an incredible guide to help us answer that very question. Our guest is Matthew Hackling. He is the director of CyberShield. He's a 25-year veteran within the cybersecurity landscape, and he has lived and breathed cybersecurity his entire career. And he's here to share his real-world playbook with all of us. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much, Matt.
It's really exciting to have you here. I am genuinely super keen to actually get into this. You shared with us a guiding philosophy within your pre-notes, and that is be honest, do your best, deliver value, and you're only as good as your last job. That's an absolutely powerful and straightforward principle. I love it. Can you help paint the picture for me though? What were the key moments within your career or your early life that helped forge that philosophy for you? Help us understand, Matt.
I think one of the things that has become clear to me over the years working in cybersecurity is that you have to deliver value to your customer. And every time you do work for someone, as a consultant or as workforce augmentation, you need to deliver value. And so you just can't just trot out like rubbish. You have to tailor your advice to your customer and make sure that they get value out of every engagement, right? And that just leads you on to bigger and better things. So one of the things that I've been focusing on for at least the last decade is delivering material risk reduction for my clients. And that means that I'm delivering a step change in their cybersecurity environment and materially reducing the risk that their organization runs with. So that's been my focus over the last decade or so. And that's played well to me, right? So I'd encourage anyone who's starting out just to think about what value you're delivering to your customers and how to increase that, and it'll always treat you well.
Yeah, that's some really good insight. Is there a particular event that last bit though? I really want to focus in on that last bit a little bit, and that is you're only as good as your last job. What does that truly intangibly mean for you?
I would say that in cybersecurity, it's a very small field. In Australia, there's probably 100 to 150 practitioners who actually have the skills to the stuff that needs to be done. And so everybody knows everybody. So it really is. I do get a lot of work through personal referral and personal references. Mm-hmm. So that's important. And globally, it's a small world as well, really, with cybersecurity. So yeah, so you just have to act with integrity and do the best you can. And yeah, it always treats you well. But if you're running around the place trying to rip people off, the word gets around very quickly, right? It's about it.
Yeah, that's very true. So there's some really great insight there. If I now focus on the first half there about delivering the value, it's the really great segue into one of the main topics that we're going to be discussing today. You've led a zero trust network transformation at an oil and gas company. For a project that is that significant, what were the core drivers that convinced the business to actually make that major investment to deliver a zero trust implementation or transformation? Because this is not an easy thing to actually do in totality.
Yeah. So with that customer, their driver for a zero trust network transformation, every organization is different, but theirs was a life safety driver. They work with critical national infrastructure, and it really was a life safety driver for their program. So that they wanted to reduce risk in their organization.
Yeah. But I mean, there's a really big difference between actually deploying zero trust and just making sure that their network is built really well and robust. There's a fair bit of a gap there, right? Why didn't they just choose to spend a little bit of extra money and just build it kind of robust and rather than just going full zero trust?
So with most of the organizations that I work with, they already spend significant amounts of money on their network infrastructure and their applications and their IT infrastructure. Most of the organizations that I work with, they're significant in nature, right? What they wanted to do is they and most other enterprises, most other CISOs want to change the paradigm in which their network operates, right? So it really, if you go between company to company, organization to organization, they're really not that different, right? They have different businesses, but the IT infrastructure they use is very similar. And this is in nearly every enterprise environment, current enterprise environment, you have a couple of challenges. The first thing is their networks are just a little bit too flat.
What do you mean by that?
If you had a security exposure or compromise of an endpoint on the network, such as a workstation or similar, the blast radius of compromise is just too large in most enterprise environments. And that's because maybe they have a firewall between us and their applications, but the firewall policy is too permissive. And it's not identity driven, right? So that's one of the things.
Yeah, okay.
But also as well, the whole network paradigm is really changing a lot with the adoption of software as a service. So it used to be that you had a castle-and-moat type approach where you had your most critical assets within the organization private network. But now with the adoption of SaaS, some of the organization's most important information assets are actually moving outside of the enterprise network and into software as service providers. Now that might be something like the customer database out into a CRM like Salesforce, or it could be the adoption of M365 so that all of your corporate email is sitting in the cloud as well, right? So things are changing a little bit. And when that comes in place, you haven't really got a castle and moat anymore, right? Your data is going out of the environment. And so you've got to start to think about things a little bit smarter, right? And you just have to start thinking about doing identity and security posture driven access to your applications.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A really powerful business case there for making the move through to zero trust. When you're doing the oil and gas company, that transformation, you'd said that your focus was a persona of a knowledge worker. What were the unique challenges for actually designing a zero trust architecture for a workforce that needs that flexibility to be able to work from anywhere and on any device?
Yeah. So I thought, I really wanted to talk today as a bit of a call to action and a bit of evangelism for this approach to talk about the knowledge worker use case, right? Because that's the most common in many organizations, right? If you're developing a zero trust strategy, the zero trust strategy should be customized to your environment, right? And your business and your crown jewel assets. For example, the zero trust strategy for an oil and gas company might be different to a government agency that is mostly knowledge workers. But still in an organization in the resources sector, you still have knowledge workers, and they're a good portion of the user population. So I'll talk mostly about that key use case. So with knowledge workers, right, knowledge workers are generally using web applications and office automation type information. They don't have, latency sensitive or applications that need bypass. And the applications they use, the resilient applications often that can be used across the internet. So with zero trust and the adoption of some of the technologies that come along with that, and the main sort of technologies that I use to help secure those knowledge worker type use cases are identity and security posture features in an identity stack, in a workforce identity stack.
Yeah.
A zero trust network access solution, and microsegmentation, really. They're the things that are three very useful tools. And one of them, like the identity stack, is very widely adopted already, right?
Yeah.
Zero Trust Network Access is coming in to replace VPN appliances. And so there is the opportunity to use the same technology that you might use for remote access to actually do that identity-driven access to your hosted applications as well. And microsegmentation is available in a lot of the technologies that are being deployed in software-defined networks on-premise and cloud. So that's usually built in there, but sometimes you need to add a visualization and management overlay to it to be successful.
What do you mean by the management overview? Was it that you said? Sorry.
So for example, if you're using microsegmentation, say for example AWS with network security groups, the management configuration of it is often infrastructure as code. You write a script, and then you look at raw logs. But if you have a third-party product to help you, what they can do is deduplicate the data, visualize the flows to allow you to reverse engineer and create a protective security policy around your applications, and be able to manage that using delegated administration. So there's some tooling that's out there now that can help you with that and help you have a consistent microsegmentation policy across your containers or your virtual machines or even host firewalls on your workstations as well.
Yeah. Okay. I will put a pin in microsegmentation because I do have a bit of a question around that one. I just want to start building this playbook out a little bit more. And one of the things that you'd highlighted was a successful approach for bringing zero trust is gradually with low impact to the customer. For everyone listening, what were the first 3 really tangible steps that you took to begin that gradual implementation?
So if I was conducting a zero trust network transformation for a knowledge worker use case, the first things I would do is I'd start to get a visibility of the flows between the users and their applications. You can do that by swapping out your VPN appliance for a zero trust network access solution for remote access. And then you can get a bit of a visibility about the policy that you might need in your zero trust network access solution between your users and your applications because you've got all that data flowing through. Then you can start to make that zero trust network access policy active on-premise when you're on the trusted network or in a zero trust access network. So once you're able to profile that policy between your users and your applications, you can start protecting your crown jewel applications. For example, if a user is not provisioned with access to log into an application, you don't need to give them all of the users access to the network attack surface of that application. So what you do is just you're only allowed to be authenticate to an application to log into it. You can actually authenticate a user to have access to the network attack surface of the application. But you can gradually bring that in the policy in your zero trust network access solution and tailor that.
Yeah. Okay. It's a really good practical starting point. And if I can weave back in microsegmentation now, if that can come back on the stage. In terms of the toolkit that you're mentioning here, you'd said that in the pre-notes around leveraging some good existing frameworks, and you've listed a couple here being the Microsoft Cybersecurity reference architecture and all the related technologies that come along with that, and also the ZTNA and microsegmentation there as well. In your playbook, at what stage do these tools really come in? And how do you decide which of the components, like microsegmentation, to start tackling first?
I think a lot of organizations may not be able to get the business case up to run a zero trust network transformation strategy. So if I was, I would be looking at replacing my VPN appliances with a zero trust network access solution, and your proxies were hosted in the cloud. So that these technologies are often delivered via something called a security service edge service from a vendor, and there's many of them out there. And we're at a point now where there are at least 3 vendors that have a product called Vendor Internet Access, and another 3 vendors that have a product called vendor private access. So you can actually see that there's a lot of commoditization of these services, and the adoption and maturity of these services has emerged when you've got three leading vendors that all call their products exactly the same thing, which is nice. So with that, that's coming in. So I would consider, adopting some of those technologies as you get to end of life of your VPN appliances and your proxy appliances. Start thinking about delivering those security services via SaaS. You don't need to manage capacity on them. They're a lot more resilient. They get automatically patched. There's lots and lots of benefits for them, and that's why people are moving to them as the successor to those technologies.
Yeah, the maintenance overhead, particularly when we're talking security devices and the automated patching, can be a good thing, can also be a bad thing. Thanks, Microsoft, for reminding us of that when you patch things automatically. Moving on here, you posed a really great question within the pre-notes as well. And that was, how do you make zero trust real? So I'm going to flip that back to you. For CISOs or IT directors, head of I&O, the people who are listening at the moment, what is one of the single most important things that they can start doing as of Monday or tomorrow to start actually making zero trust a reality? What steps can they be taking? So you just mentioned there around analyzing and looking at end of life. Let's say that we've identified a VPN box that's end of life. Now what?
I think in terms of steps, I was talking to a CISO and I said, well, how to progress your zero trust strategy. Firstly, you need to have a strategy, right? And the thing is, what is a strategy? Strategy is just a plan, right? So in the strategy, you've got to have your outcomes defined well and to know what success is. And then you just work your way backwards and you think about, how can I start to achieve this? And it might be, their plan might be, hey, I can see that some of this security technology is going to come end of life. When I want to replace it, I want to replace it with something that has got the capability to deliver on my zero trust strategy. They might find that they need a new technology added to the mix. They might need to put a business case together for that, right? And pitch that business case in order to deliver that. For example, microsegmentation is not something that is easily executed on, because if you do piecemeal infrastructure as code type activities on a per application basis, it doesn't come together and accelerate as well as if you have a visualization and management overlay over all the different software-defined networks in your organization. Yeah. So I think about getting that plan right, seeing the opportunities that are coming up before you taking advantage of those to progress the strategy. They're important. I think the thing about this is always having a pragmatic strategy, right? Perfection is the enemy of progress, right? You need to have regular progress and maturity. And you need to know, well, what does good look like for me? And think about how can you make this sustainable and supportable, so you don't have a burst of activity and some improvements and then the maturity drop off because it's too hard and too expensive, right? So you need to be pragmatic about it. So I think that one of the best ways of being pragmatic about your zero trust strategy is to avoid boiling the ocean, right? Don't try and have a perfect centrally managed policy for every application. You need to think about, how do you want to build resilience in your organization? And so you need to target your crown jewel applications. So your most critical applications that support your most critical business processes. So you want to start with those.
I haven't heard the saying before of boiling the ocean. What does that mean?
Oh, it's all, for example, if you tried to go out with a little camp stove and a pot and tried to scoop water out of the ocean and tried to boil it, right? It would not be achievable, right? The phrase boiling the ocean means you're trying to take on something that's not achievable, right? But for example, your goal was to boil enough water to make a bowl of pasta, right? Then that's more achievable, right? Yeah. So you need to have a strategy that's aligned with the outcomes that to support the business, right? And really, if you ask the rest of the organization what's important to them, that they want to be able to maintain their key business functions despite the network being under attack, right? That everyone is searching for increased resilience to cyber events.
Yeah, that's very true. That's taking it from a CISO lens of
Mm.
saying a strategy first. And I think that that's incredibly important. And I do agree with that. I say you're running at night through a forest, everyone's blindfolded. Yes, everyone is running somewhere, but whether you're all running in the right direction or not, or the same direction is a completely different thing. And having a strategy is one of the most important things to really be that guiding light. If I can just push back on that though and challenge that, that's from a CISO lens. If you were coming in and saying to someone who's in charge of infrastructure, how would you say that for me to sit there and say, well, this is why we need to be doing this work, and we need to be leveraging all your cloud services, and you need to be building us new environments.
If I was talking to someone who's like an infrastructure manager, right, you just need to think about what applications and what Gradual assets and systems that they look after, right? For example, an infrastructure person may be looking after the hosting services that deliver to the organization, right? Maybe some of the network or something similar. Mostly that'd be the hosting services, right? So you might want to talk to them about privileged access and protecting their management plane for their hosting services, right? Because that's what the threat actors go for. They go for the control plane, and then they go for the management plane, and then the data plane, right? So if they can't get access, if you can get access to the control plane, such as Active Directory or Entra ID or something similar, you can take control of the rest of the organization, right? If you can take control of the management plane, such as VMware or something similar, you can impact all the applications that are hosted on VMware, right?
Yeah.
So you would talk to them about really about privileged access to their infrastructure and say, hey, Mr. Infrastructure Manager, don't you have service levels to your business? You want to maintain those service levels to your business. If you had a security incident that impacted your management plane, you would not be able to deliver those services to your customer, right? So you might want to think about, and one of the easiest zero trust use cases is protecting the management plane, because often you can identify what the management plane applications are and the management users, right? Because there are people in IT and their IT systems, and the IT systems know those applications well. So you might be able to, for example, say only privileged users using their privileged account can connect to the management plane applications, right? By zero trust network access. That's one way of doing it.
Yeah, so basically bring them along with the journey. Talking about the attack vectors and that attack surface, if we say the real world situations here, right? Implementing a zero trust transformation is never a straight line to success. There's always going to be some hiccups or some failures along the path here. So within what you've seen before, what are some of the largest hurdles that you have to overcome as you're starting to move along the path for the journey to a zero trust transformation?
Yeah. In terms of the largest hurdles, I think there's two really important prerequisites for a zero trust network transformation to be successful. And these are quite hard prerequisites for most organizations to execute on. Now, the first thing is you really need a good CMDB, configuration management database. You need to know what applications are running on what servers, at least, and who owns them, as a bare minimum, right? So if your CMDB data quality is terrible, your zero trust network transformation progress will be very slow, right? Because really you're going to have to go and reverse engineer what applications on what servers and who owns them, right? But if you have that, that's a good enabler. Another key enabler that's going to help you accelerate is to have all your crown jewel applications onboarded onto an identity governance administration solution. Because with that, you've got a system that automatically provisions and removes users and does access certifications and those sort of activities. But you can actually leverage that implementation to also provision and deprovision network access for those Gradual applications. So things that dependence for starting a successful zero trust network transformation. And these were two things that I learned through doing some successful ones. If you can get, and they're two things that any organization can make progress on, especially the CMDB one.
Yeah, there was certainly one that I didn't expect. I don't know if you saw my face of surprise. I was like, wow, that's not what I was expecting. And when you say CMDB, obviously that's all the details about the application and all those types of things. How important, though, is system diagrams or the high-level architecture diagrams, those types of things? Are they important?
That's not that important. The thing that is, the reason I mentioned CMDB data quality is something that's important is, if you've got like your business impact analysis from your business continuity practices in your CMDB, you effectively have got a list of what your crown jewel applications are already. Right? You can leverage that. Oh, okay. This application is a platinum application. That's a crown jewel application. This application is a bronze application. It's not that important. We're going to focus on the most important applications, right, first. Because that's how you deliver the most risk reduction quickly. You focus on the most important applications. Knowing who owns them is good, because how do you get permission to make policy changes that impact the applications? You have to know who the owners are, right? But in terms of like the network flows, you can reverse engineer these. Even the documentation's not that bad. You can use the tooling to actually reverse engineer the network flows and build protected policy. So those dependencies, two key things that any organization that wants to do zero trust transformation and build a more resilient network can progress with. They have many security benefits doing both of those things, right, and reduce risk in many ways. Can help you respond to incidents better if you know what applications are what servers and who owns them, right? For example. Another thing that is important for doing a very successful zero trust network transformation is developing an approach to the policy. And aspects that you want to consider in the policy is you may want to have a more granular and more restrictive policy for your most important assets, your crown jewel assets. But you might want to have a base policy that prevents common lateral movement techniques on your less important applications. And also in your policy management approach, you may also want to consider how supportable the policy is going to be. Right? And this comes down to your organization, right? You might want to do a lot of delegation of the policy down to individual application teams, if you've got a lot of applications. Or depending on your security posture, you might want to do central management, because you just have to get it right for some reason. Your approach for rollout, policy management, the applications you're targeting in what waves, the granularity of the policy, it's all stuff to work into that roadmap and that forward approach.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's so funny because you'd mentioned the business impact assessments or the business continuity planning there, and that was actually going to be one of my next questions. So if I just dig in that a little bit, we often see a bit of a chicken and egg situation here where we say, well, we need to be doing risk management and all those types of things. But we really can't do that unless the business continuity planning and the business impact assessments, those types of things have run through and you've done those workshops. How critical do you actually find this of saying, yes, that is absolutely mandatory to do a really good BIA, BCP, hand-in-hand prior? Does it need to be robust and in-depth? Or can you do a bit of a high level? Like, can it be iterative or not?
I think, as always, perfection is the enemy of progress, right? So, for example, if you said, I can't start my zero trust transformation, or I can't start improving my backup practices unless I've done BIA of all my apps. Real. If you got like maybe most of your IT leadership in a meeting and said, can you tell me, what your 10 apps are, right? They'd probably be able to write down what their top 10 apps were on a piece of paper. So if you went to the owners of most of the application portfolios and asked them, can you tell me what the top 10 apps are? Okay, and you went to your infrastructure people and said, what are your top 10 systems? They'd probably be able to give you a good list. You'd probably be able to get a good list of maybe 20 or 30 systems and maybe 50 applications, which could be a starting point, right? That could be a starting point for defining your crown jewel applications. It's very likely that people in your organization, like your enterprise architects or security architects, would have the experience with the organization, would be able to get you a fairly decent list, right? Now, list is a collection of opinions from a collection of people, right? It's not gone through. So what will happen is good actors in the organization, right, will participate, right? They will say, hey, I think my application is important to the organization, so I'll participate in this initiative to help secure the application and maintain service levels, right? But less good actors will try and blow off the security initiative, right? Or they'll try and blow off the extra costs that may come with increased backup or resilience requirements, right, for their application. You always have this problem with some people that want to sweat assets and make their bottom line look better for a short period of time versus people who want to invest and have applications that are fit for purpose, right? So there's always that sort of balance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go through a formal BCP, BIA workshop type activity, you're driving a bit more rigor through that process, and you get a little bit better fidelity, but also you get organizational commitment and recognition that these applications are the crown jewels and require protection. People are on the hook. If they've gone through a formal BIA process, they're on the hook for committing to infrastructure costs or increased security costs to protect their application the way it should be protected.
Yeah. So I guess the big lesson there is do the governance, but at the right amount. Don't overcook it. Don't try and boil the ocean. I'll use that for you. But also don't go ahead and just be completely cowboyish and just skip it.
With everything, right? Like if you're bringing in you're doing a transformation in the network paradigm where you need security policy to allow applications to talk to each other, and you need security policy to allow users to talk to applications, right? It's not like I just put this thing on and everybody can see it now. It's a different change in that paradigm, right? So you need to get buy-in, and you need to get approval from people to do the testing and allow for changes. Right now, the thing is, the changes of putting microsegmentation or putting in a zero trust network access solution, right? You don't need to do full regression testing on your applications, right? To adopt these technologies, you just need to do smoke test type technologies. So it's not like you have to retest every application, right? But you do need to do a smoke test. And with the way you can roll out this policy, you can roll out the policy in a monitor mode, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, like a monitor mode.
And then you can roll out the policy in a protective mode with hypercare. And some of these technologies even have a button you can press that will, for example, turn off the policy for about 5-10 minutes. And so you can say, okay, cool. Oh, so you're having a problem? Okay, let me just turn off the policy. And okay, you've got 10 minutes, right? Oh, problem's still there? Okay, it's not the network policy, right? So there's the tooling can help you with the rollout and supporting that rollout and being able to roll a policy out and roll a policy back quickly. So
yeah, okay. There's some really big lessons there. I think everyone can learn from that. If I just delve in on that a little bit more, you started talking about some misconceptions there. But what are some of the largest mistakes and misconceptions that you've seen in the past?
I think some of the biggest mistakes that I've seen people get stuck on is that they think they need to protect every application to a high standard, right? Rather than focusing on the most important applications. So that boiling the ocean problem is where people get stuck. They go, oh, this is going to cost $50 million and take 20 years. But if they think about focusing on protecting the most important applications, they can actually get some material risk reduction in less than 2 years. So yeah, that's a big problem. Setting out as well without some of those key dependencies set out, that can actually retard progress. And so you won't get as far as you could if you had a mature identity governance administration rollout or a good CMDB data quality. You can kind of still make progress, but really you're almost doing the work of those two initiatives, right? Like through the Zero Trust program, you're fixing up those things. So if you had them, you'd be a bit better. But I think the thing too as well is thinking that it's just a technology problem and that you don't need to think about things like process or operational model or the strategy, right? Because that will happen. People put something in and then it'll break things and then people will turn it off, right? So you've really got to have a considered approach to make it sustainable and pragmatic, right?
Yeah, so you started touching on that, the people, process, and technology. What about the people? What about the mindset? Is there a cultural change that is a large component of this, or not as much?
The cultural change, especially when it comes to side of things, right? Where you're implementing what's called application-centric microsegmentation. You're protecting an application from an application in the data center, right? You're preventing attacker lateral movement in the data center environment, right? So when you're implementing that, you really need to, you'll be much more successful if you drive a culture of ownership of security down to the application team. If
Yeah.
you get the application team to realize that they're responsible for the application, but they can also be responsible for the security of their application, and they should be, that it's their responsibility as well, you'll be a lot more successful than trying to get a central externalized team to do that. They're always going to be pushing it up a hill because they're not intimately aware of the application and its interfaces with other applications in the data center. So if you can drive some ownership of security posture within the application team, you'll get a lot further with your microsegmentation. You'll get a lot further a lot quicker.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. And I always push the notion of the extreme ownership. You'd mentioned at the start there about having a bit of a call to action. So if we start looking forward to the future, you'd said that it's time for mass adoption of zero trust. For aspiring IT professionals who are listening, a key part of our mission of this podcast is that veteran to emerging talent and that knowledge transfer that comes with that. So, for the aspiring IT professionals, what skills should they be building to lead these kinds of transformations into the future?
Cool. Well, personally, for myself, I'm a Forrester certified zero trust strategist. So I found that was a very useful course to do to understand how to build a good zero trust strategy in organizations. Just was nice to formalize that. I think quite highly of that training. So if you're in an enterprise environment, maybe someone in your organization should do a course like that to actually understand the approach of putting together a zero trust strategy. But in terms of a call to action for IT people, we're coming to a tipping point now where proxy appliances and VPN appliances will go in the dustbin of history very shortly, right? And they'll be replaced by new technologies. Those technologies may come from a Microsoft or a Netscape or a Zscaler or even a Palo Alto or somewhere like that. And your organization will elect to pick one of those vendors and a set of technologies like Zero Trust Network Access and Secure Web Gateway. So I would encourage people to figure out what technology the organization is likely to adopt to replace their VPN appliances and their proxy appliances, and learn how to develop a identity and security posture driven policy using those technologies. I would encourage people to also as well look to leverage what's available in Entra ID conditional access. So Entra ID is the dominant identity provider in most organizations, top right quadrant for the last 6 years from Gartner. So it's adoption across many organizations, and there is a lot of security goodness you can get out of conditional access policy. So I would encourage people to look into learning conditional access policy. It's hard to manage, but it's getting better and better. They even introduced an AI agent to help you build your conditional access policy just recently. That was quite surprising. And I thought, oh, that's something I'll have to look into because conditional access policies are hard to do. Yeah.
Yeah, especially for larger organizations where you have multiple caps and they start combining together, and it can become a bit of a nightmare. The other thing that I'll just add on to that, though, is if you are doing conditional access policies, there's code. Please do that. And when I say please, I mean do
it. Yeah. So, for example, if you're in an application squad, right, and you're doing infrastructure as code, and you're hosting in cloud, well, look to deploy your network security groups via infrastructure as code, right? And build a protective policy to protect your application from the other applications in the hosting environment. So that would be another thing that you can pick up and do and learn skills in. If you've got a visualization, a data deduplication, visualization, and management overlay to go over all those network security groups, you'll be more successful. But that doesn't mean you can't make a start, right? Even if you do have to squint at lines in a text, look at text, and you just have to do more work with your client, right? An IDE.
Yeah, perfect. Final question. For those that are just starting in cybersecurity, so if we still stay with the emerging talent here, and for people who are aspiring for a leadership position, what are the core lessons that you have learned that have been absolutely instrumental for you to become a leader within this space? What can the next generation of cyber security professionals be taking away from your own journey?
I think the things that have been helpful to myself is having an inquiring mind and a thirst for knowledge. So if you're a person with an inquiring mind who likes to understand how things work at a low level of detail and likes to understand the whole enterprise stack, not just security technology, security could be a place for you. So I think having an inquiring mind is really going to set you up for success. I've focused on learning technologies that I know are of benefit to organizations. So I do track trends in technology. I can see new technologies coming in and older technologies going out. And so I learn how to secure those. You've just got to constantly learn new technologies, but you're always applying the same concepts and the same principles to those new technologies, which is nice. I hope that the next generation of security professionals are more confident in an IDE and committing code than the current generation of security professionals. I think that application security, infrastructure as code, and platform engineering is the way to deliver security at scale in the future. But yeah, I look forward to more young, passionate, dedicated people joining the profession.
Yeah, there's a really good point there. What role do you think AI has? Like, I'm just, we can't do an interview without talking about AI once, right? It's 2025. That would be, be terrible if we didn't do that. What's your thoughts of AI, particularly within the coding space, like DevSecOps space, but also from the lens of securing AI? What's your thoughts on that?
I think there's some really exciting things happening with AI that can actually be of help. Now, firstly, I would say to, CIOs out there, no, AI is not going to replace your security operations center, right? It's not going to replace shifts of people working 24/7, 365. That's not going to happen. Give up on that. That's not happening in the short term, right? But LLMs, in generative AI, can help you with lots of things. For example, we've seen with Security Copilot in the Microsoft sort of space, it's very useful for summarizing security events from raw data into incident reports in minutes, right? Something that could take days to weeks to be done manually, right? So I think that's a really good use case, but it's expensive, right? So I'm starting to see there are opportunities to use some of these models to improve what you're doing. So for example, that AI assistant for conditional access policy, and security has been using machine learning for anomaly detection, for decades, right? And so that's in the background, right? But I've seen some pretty useful things. I've seen executives being given LLM chatbots to query data sets, security threat intelligence, for example. So that's pretty useful. One organization was doing this. I thought it was very cool. They put all their threat intelligence write-ups into a database, and then they gave their CISO a chatbot that could ask questions of the data set. So, for example, so they could very easily ask questions, say, what are the top 10 threat actors and techniques targeting an application of this type in our organization? And they could drop out a list for them in a minute. So there are some useful use cases that I've seen, but it's all about continuous incremental improvements, right?
So just going back to that chatbot, it's almost like a CIO advisor.
Yeah, more like a CISO
of
like a
sorts.
CISO advisor. Like for example, like CISO might be going to a meeting with an owner of a particular application portfolio, and they'd want to have a discussion supported in fact about why they should commit to a security initiative, right? And so what they might do in the past is they might talk to a governance risk and compliance analyst and ask them to compile a list of threats, or talk to their cyber threat intelligence people in the SOC or similar. But now they could actually ask a chatbot and get the information really quickly, right at the tips of their fingers. You could query potentially you could query your GRC solution, your governance risk and compliance solution, or your cyber threat intelligence solution with an LLM chatbot, and get useful data for that meeting you're having in half an hour with somebody, right?
Yeah, but I guess it would also be really good from a reporting perspective of, what are the major attacks from that our SOC knock has been seeing, those types of things as well.
Yeah,
So that makes complete sense.
So as we all know, we can use an LLM to generate a bunch of rubbish for auditors very quickly, right? Right. You could use an LLM plugged into a proprietary data set, provide data-driven insights to support audits or similar, right?
Yeah. Poisoning the well's one big thing that I'm reading a lot more about lately as well. So before we move to the wrap up, can I just ask, what is the one biggest thing that Matthew Hackling is worried about in the cybersecurity landscape right now, and why?
I think we live in very interesting times. I think there's a lot of national security threats at a nation state level that are quite intense. And in the past, a lot of these nation state threats have been very much, not talked about in public. But currently we have the FBI, everybody produced reports telling us about threats from named nation states now. So I think that is something that's very, very interesting. And I'll give you a good example of sometimes the crazy stuff that happens, right? So I have a customer I work with in the nonprofit sector. I do some work with nonprofits and helping coach them. Yeah, there was a targeted attack on IP telephony systems across Australia by North Koreans, right? by the North Koreans. So thousands and hundreds of thousands of IP telephony installations around the world were targeted with a supply chain attack by North Koreans to deploy ransomware, to get ransoms to extract money, to drive their weapons program in North Korea, right? And so that's a really interesting kind of thing where it was a nation state not targeting other nation state like critical infrastructure. It was targeting like normal organizations across Australia to deploy ransomware to steal money to fund their weapons program. I thought that was something that was quite unusual and I hadn't seen. So that's the sort of stuff that I go, So most organizations are thinking about protecting themselves from garden variety cyber criminals, but most organizations are not thinking they have to protect themselves against nation states. But that's changing. Internet's a strange place.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a really great example. And I often say to people that if a bad actor that is doing something like that, what else are they going to do when they actually learn about your crown jewels data, if I use your words? My mind goes to a GP, right? Like a doctor's surgery sort of thing. And they go, oh, well, cybersecurity is not that important to me. They're not going to come after me because, there's other big fish. And whilst I do agree with that, what they fail to think about is just how important that is to their own operations. So they sort of take a bit of a laxed view on this. And I think that's a really great example of, if a nation state actors are going to be trying to target an IP system, they could easily target your, corner shop GP practices. Right?
I think so. With a lot of, say, medical practices, more and more of their operations are centralized in SaaS platforms like HotDoc and similar, right, and practice management systems. So there is a lot of consolidation in smaller shops. The thing is, though, and this is where it comes into like supply chain, right? So, for example, you say, I, as an individual GP surgery, why is someone going to ransomware me? I haven't got that much money. Okay, if they could rip you off at a cost to them and make $10,000 out of you, it is worthwhile for them. But for example, if they target a SaaS practice management solution for thousands of GPs, right? They might likely to have a bigger payday, right, in terms of extortion. So,
Yeah.
it's just like
Medi-secure,
everyone's on
wasn't
the
it?
internet these days, right? Spies, criminals, thieves, scammers. Everyone's on the internet, so that's why crime's on the internet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Medi-secure, wasn't that was one of the sort of late ones last year? They got into the electronic script platform.
Was
Something like 700,000 or something like that.
yeah, this yep.
Data gone.
If you look
Yeah.
back in nearly every sector, industry sector, you can think of a recent security incident, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Qantas. Qantas coming in there to show us how important actually having good third-party security is.
Yes.
Is the shared responsibility model. I always say, yeah, look, you've got a shared responsibility model, which means they share all of their risk only with you.
So I think if you're an IT, executive, you honestly can't say that security is not a problem for me. We're not going to be targeted. You can't. Like when we've had breaches of telcos like Optus, health insurers like Medibank Private, financial services like Latitude Financial, hospitals, St. Vincent's. Is there transportation, manufacturing? Yeah, there's examples in nearly every industry sector that are that you can point to and say, really, you're not like company X or organization Y, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It is not just the financial sector or the critical infrastructure sector and government that gets targeted. Yes, they do definitely get targeted a lot, and you can see that by the numbers coming out of the ACSC that they published their threat report. I forget what it's called now. But yeah, you can see those numbers there are reflected there within that report. So yeah, it is definitely remiss of people, I would say, at best, if people don't take a good view that they are actually all a part of the solution. So yeah, it's not just on cybersecurity professionals.
Security is everybody's job. And I always say that security is a quality attribute. So if you want to deliver quality IT solutions to your organization, right, you should be delivering secure ones. So.
Yeah. This has been an absolutely beautiful masterclass in making this, at least for me, a zero trust network strategy, breaking it down, making it a little bit more real and tangible. So I do really thank you for this deep dive that you've given us. Before we do wrap up, though, you're involved in some important work there with CyberShield, your company, and you'd sort of mentioned it a little bit there within the not-for-profit sector. So if I can sort of dive in on that one a little bit more, can you tell our audience about CyberShield's mission to actually be offering a low-cost and a high-value consulting for the not-for-profit sector?
Yeah, so I personally deliver a lot of services into federal government. And in the past, I've worked a lot with financial sector and utilities and resources companies. But one thing I recognized over the years is that small community health, community housing, and non-profit organizations that are doing really valuable work in our community, that they're not really getting serviced properly by the largest cybersecurity consultancies in Australia. But of course, the cost of sale for a cybersecurity consultancy into a non-profit is the same as the cost of sale into a large bank. Or would you focus on this sector? I've been doing some work over the last couple of years with a number of clients under the banner of CyberShield non-profit, and I hope to do more in this sector and deliver them some high-quality services and deliver them pragmatic advice that's tailored to their organization in its needs and the security posture that's required. So often, like delivering really high quality security is about making it right for the organization and tailoring the security for their nature of business and the threats that they're facing and their budget as well. I focus on empowering these organizations to improve their own security and get on a path of continuous improvement.
Yeah, excellent. It's absolutely fantastic to be something that is really quite specific for the not-for-profit sector. As I mature a lot more, I won't say as I get older and grayer, But as I'm mature a lot more, I'm really starting to lean more towards the impact that the work has and how that makes you feel at the end of the day a lot more, rather than just focusing on the exact work that I'm doing and how much money it is. So
I think, if you get into cybersecurity, at your heart, you may be a public servant, right? You want to do the best for your community and help improve things in your community. And that's one of the reasons why I like working with cybersecurity people. They're always pretty great people because it's a hard job, and you've got to have a good heart to make progress in it, right? I focus on empowering these organizations to improve their own security and get on a path of continuous improvement.
yeah, that's right. Awesome. That has been some really great advice there, and you've given us some really good practical things that we can work with there, and all the learnings that you've had along the way. I really do thank you for sharing that with us. What we will do is we'll be linking it through to the show notes if anyone wants to learn more about CyberShield. So if there is anyone listening though, in addition to the show note, can they find some more information about CyberShield?
I've got a website, cybershieldprofit.com, so you can have a look at that website. But also, you can just look me up on LinkedIn and send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm always willing to have a chat with somebody about security.
Yeah, and as we said, we should be making sure that security is everyone's business. So it's fantastic.
Thanks very much. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt.
For anyone who is listening, if you have found this conversation doable as I did, there are a few simple things that we can really be supporting the show. And that is, first, sharing it with a colleague that you think should be hearing more about the Zero Trust implementation for networking. Second, leave us a comment on it over on YouTube or on where you get your podcasts from. Also, please like the video and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into topics within the enterprise tech landscape. Till next time, thank you very much for listening. Keep learning, keep evolving, and lead with impact.